Firstly, thanks to Shravan for organizing this, and also thanks to all the speakers in the morning for the fantastic talks. So in this talk, I'll just give a brief overview of Google Research India and also highlight some of the work that we are doing, which I think could be relevant in the light of like the previous talks. And in the end, I'll end with a few ways to collaborate and how to maybe take this forward. So Google Research India is actually a new lab. So it was launched in 2019, but within the last 2-3 years, we have grown quite a bit. And overall, we have 3 directions in which we evaluate our work. The first one is scientific impact. So what are the kind of scientific contributions that we are making to the community, to the scientific community, as measured in terms of, say, publications at top research conferences or open source projects and so on. The second one is societal impact, and we have several projects which are in close collaboration with NGOs on topics of public interest, such as like public health, agriculture, ecology, and so on. And finally, we would like to do research contributions that can help and improve Google's products as well. Okay. And in terms of technical areas, so these are some of the key areas in our lab at the moment. And in particular, I would like to call out maybe computer vision, natural language understanding, machine learning optimization, cognitive sciences, and so on. So in the next few slides, I'll highlight some of the sample projects from some of these technical areas, which I thought would be relevant in the light of like the previous talks. So let me start with computer vision. So one of the projects I would like to highlight in this context is how we can use satellite images to estimate things that are on the ground. So some of our recent work has evaluated the efficacy of self-supervised learning methods, which are unsupervised, which just look at like the satellite data, and then eventually try to estimate like how can we estimate like the river bed from other kind of land, and similarly like land use, and similarly, so this one is for the water quality or like groundwater levels based on just satellite images. Okay, so these are some of the kind of things that we have done in computer vision. Moving on to natural language understanding. So we now have, so GPT-3 was mentioned quite a few times in the earlier talk. So we know that there exists like BERT and GPT-3 and so on, like very powerful natural language models. But these models are very, very advanced, particularly for English and other languages, where we have a lot of training data that's available on the web. But if you come to say Indian languages, where there is much less amount of training data, open training data available on the web, the models performance is not as great. And our team has done work on developing models which actually work well even for Indian languages. And in particular, from a technical point of view, this is called like low resource languages, where we are using leveraging data, low amounts of data from multiple languages, and somehow using all of them together to get improvements across all of the board. Okay. And we open sourced this language model called Neural recently. And finally, I would also like to highlight our work in optimization and foundational machine learning. And in particular, I felt that these are some of the things that came up in multiple talks from the morning. So the first one is out of distribution robustness. For example, if we are predicting, say, protein structure or applications to any other field like astronomy and so on, usually the test data that we are getting does not necessarily come from the same kind of training data. For example, you might get proteins from one particular source like humans and so on, and then we would like to learn something which will also tell us about proteins that occur in, say, animals or other species. And similarly, I assume that even in astronomy and other cases, so we get data from some sources and we would like to use this to gain understanding, which will enable us to do something even on different data. So we have developed algorithms which work well on out of distribution data, and this is one of the focus areas in our lab, for example. And the second one I would like to highlight is on unsupervised or self-supervised learning. And this is, so unsupervised learning is the case where we don't have any labeled information. For example, if someone gives me a picture and tells me this is a cat, this is a dog, and so on, so that's called labeled information. But if I'm just given a stream of pictures, like for example, like the observations that are coming from the astronomy, like the telescopes and so on, it's all unsupervised. So nobody is telling me that this is the signal of a black hole collision or anything of that sort. So so another research direction that we are currently focusing on is on developing better unsupervised, self-supervised learning algorithms what are the things which work in different settings, and so on. And the third thing that also came up multiple times in the earlier talks is multitask learning, where we have maybe a small amount of data, but then we have different kinds of measurements on the same data, right? So these are measurements that are related because they're all on the same underlying sample, but they tell us different things about the same thing. And can we use this kind of data to actually require very little amount of data from each of the different dimensions, but at the same time helps us learn more efficiently about all of them together, because somehow all of them share some common structure. Okay? And finally, we also have done some work in the past on understanding whether quantum computers can speed up certain canonical optimization tasks. And so I just wanted to highlight that one here. So we also have a center for AI for social good, and in particular, in the past year, we have had a focus on 3 different areas. So the first one is public health, the second one is agriculture, and the third one is conservation. And we have called for proposals, and the proposals have come from like academic partners, both in India and outside of India. And then they partnered with NGOs to actually go from like a research stage to actually a deployment stage and make it go through a full cycle. And Google is supporting so the lab is supporting all of these projects with both funds as well as like cloud compute credits and some amount of headcount and so on. Okay. So this is my last slide, and I would just like to wrap by saying that usually we have a lot of research collaborations with faculty in academia on like the topics of mutual interest. And in addition to that, we also have research grants and programs, both for in terms of like faculty awards and so on, as well as fellowships for PhD students, cloud credits for compute resources and so on. At the same time, finally, we also have opportunities for continuing these collaborations as internships or student researchers, visiting faculties, postdoc, and so on. So this is all I wanted to say. Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions to Praneeth? I have one question. So of the topics that you've seen, are there things that interest you and your team and you would like to collaborate with us on and so on?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, actually, I've been talking to Shruti about problems related to estimating the structure of molecules and so on. But I mean, many of the topics I was hearing for the first time, but I see that a lot of things could be interesting. It would be maybe good to figure out how to maybe continue the conversation further. Yeah.
Shubhadeep, you want to ask?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I have a question regarding the process of applying for a project and then being selected and working with you guys. So what is the procedure? Is there a formal procedure which you need to follow for applying for a collaboration with Google and being selected for working?
So in terms of collaborations, they are more people driven. So like if people from both the sides are interested, like they just get together and get started on working on something. In terms of like research grants and programs and so on, there is usually a particular cycle for each of these programs, and there will be a formal application process and things like that.
Okay, great. So it will be great if we can come to know about the process. I'm interested.
So yeah, so maybe I can share some of these ways with Shravan, and then he can circulate them.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Praneeth, just to ask you, you know, in the US, etc., as you know very well, a model which has emerged is that people are partly spending time in academia and partly at, you know,
right,
institutions like Google, right? And it's working very well.
Right.
We have not so far been successful in operationalizing such a model in TIFR, but we are trying. And I was curious if there's an Indian institution which has successfully operationalize this, you know, an academic institution which allows a part-time appointment at the institution, part-time with Google or
yeah.
Microsoft.
So I don't know about a part-time appointment. Like the current way we have is about this visiting faculty, and people can come spend like 3 months, 6 months, a year, up to a year with us.
And it can be on a sort of continuing basis, like for a few years you spend 3 months at Google and go back.
I think, yeah, he's talking about something different, right?
Yeah. So So in the US, for example, I know of appointments which are like 1 day a week and something like that. Those at the moment I don't think we currently have, and this might be something again we can continue discussing and seeing if there is a way to figure out other modalities other than like the visiting faculty that might be more suited and appropriate. Yeah.
So I think in the US and all, a lot of the engagements also institutional, right? And this, like from both MSR and from you, but it's more individual driven. But
Right.
I guess that's kind of the broad question, that here it's more of an institutional,
I
a
see.
suggestion of an institutional engagement. So that would be nice to consider.
I see. I'll certainly convey this. Thank you.
Thanks, Praneeth.
Thank you, Shravan.